the most enriching experience of my life. I literally cried during her deposition. I felt as if I was listening to someone to whom the hand of God had come down at a single point in time through the intercession of Cardinal Newman and entered this woman's life and saved that mother and that child. That child was Gemma Villalobos, and she was born on 12/27/13. I'm Dr. Jerry Casey, and I'm a retired family physician who initially attended Mundelein as a student in 1970. In October of 2014, I was called by one of the canon lawyers at the Archdiocese and was asked whether or not I would be willing to serve on a tribunal that was investigating a potential miracle that could be declared if the investigation proved positive. Melissa was in her 7th pregnancy. She had had 4 previous children, live and successful. She had had 2 miscarriages, one immediately prior to her becoming pregnant for this 7th time. Because of her maternal age and because of the 2 prior miscarriages and because she had had some prior problems with a placenta accreta where the placenta actually was fused to the uterine wall, all of those factors led her to be a high-risk pregnancy. In about the 5th week of the pregnancy, she developed more copious bleeding, and to the point where she called her obstetrician and he advised her to go to the emergency room. She did go to the emergency room, and she had a fetus that was appropriate for age, had normal fetal heart tones. However, they also found a subchorionic hematoma, which is a blood clot between the placenta and the wall of the uterus. This is an added risk factor. Depending on the position and size of the hematoma, it adds certain risks to the pregnancy. And the only treatment available is bed rest. Now, she had 4 children at home. Her husband stayed home for several days. He was able to do so, but then he had to go back to work. And so she did as much bed rest as she could and stayed in a very, recumbent position as much as possible, but only to the extent that was possible. The bleeding then, in the next several days, not only became bleeding with any activity, but bleeding then with less activity and bleeding even at rest. On the morning of 5/15/13, she had a significant amount of bleeding. She didn't want her children to see it. They were eating breakfast. She said, "I'm going to my room." She went to her room, and she was in the bathroom and started developing cramping pain as well. She lied on the floor, and as she was bleeding, she said, "Cardinal Newman, please stop my bleeding." The bleeding immediately, instantaneously, spontaneously ceased. And she never had further bleeding after that moment, other than the remnants what had been there. Her devotion to Cardinal Newman had started several years before that. It had started after she had seen a television show about Cardinal Newman and began to read books and began to read about his history. So she became very devoted to him. And her devotion went on multiple years. And that's why she called out his name and asked for his intercession and his help. The opinion of both ab inspectione physicians and her treating physician and myself, and I had had some experience in obstetrics, and I did reviews of the literature on all of the risk factors. None of us could give a medical explanation in any reasonable fashion why this immediate, instantaneous, spontaneous, and enduring cessation took place. As a result of that, we don't declare there's a miracle. we declare that we can find no medical reason why at that moment that bleeding ceased. We then deposed Mrs. Villalobos, her husband, her spiritual advisor, her treating physician, and then after the ab inspectione physicians had examined her and thoroughly had gone through her records, we then deposed them as well. It was a unanimous opinion that there was no medical explanation for this. And then it was sent to the tribunal to say, yes, we should send this forward to Rome and present it as a potential miracle. Pope Francis made the ultimate decision, and I believe it was in July of this year, of this past year, that he made that decision, and then it was presented later to the public, and then the date was set for the canonization. Happily, my wife and I, my 2 sons, my daughters-in-law, and my 3 grandchildren have all been invited, and we are going to Rome to what I think will be the pinnacle of my religious experience. Serving on the tribunal has to be the most fulfilling religious experience of my life.